Hey, can everyone hear me? Can we get a confirmation? Can everyone hear me? Pretty sure everyone can. I do sound check before I start, just so that I don't start talking and everybody's going, what's she saying? I've seen her mouth move, but nothing. Okay, sounds good. Sweet. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Hello from Los Angeles. Hello to everyone here. Hello to Brazil, United States, Ireland. I see you guys. And all of a sudden we have quite a few more people show up. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I've got some really nice news today. But before we get to all of that nice news, yes, hello to Scotland. And hello Italy. Hello to Italy. Alrighty. First, I'd like to preface everything by saying, please no trolling and please no spamming of your questions. If you would like a question answered, just log it down in the chat. A little bit of a warning: if it's a issue you have with your own aircraft, unless the question is pretty basic, more likely than not, we will have to ask you to email details of the situation to service@hubsan.com. If you hear me read out your situation and say email service@hubsan.com, I really mean email service@hubsan.com with the details, because there's no way we're going to be able to get it done in a live stream when I have to answer a lot of different questions that people have. Second is a shout out to all of the user-made Hubsan communities across Facebook. We've got the H501, H502, H122 group led by Brian Young. And of course, we have the Hubsan QC and support group led by Christopher Wade. And we also have, I believe, the Hubsan H501S quadcopter group. I don't remember who leads that one, so sorry. But and also countless others, just so many of our veteran pilots who have made it possible for us to be here today. I'd always like to give them a shout out before every single live stream. And also, what else? I think that's it. Oh yeah, we won't be talking about any sort of firmware release unless it is already released and we have tested it thoroughly. Hopefully I won't have to too much reiterate why, but let's just say that if even there is any sort of firmware in development, you never want to give pressure to the people making the firmware and to the people testing the firmware, or that can lead to disastrous results if that sort of firmware is released without it being fully certified to be good. That's the reason. All right, so let's get started. I've got some awesome news for everybody, and I'd like to thank the client QC testing group for releasing this information for me, led by Christopher at the Hubsan QC and support group, and several of the people who he extended invites to for the testing. Apparently, the 123D is an all-out right of a success with the team. They really love it. They can confirm my testimony to it being extremely tough. I have one right here. This is the one that we use for testing here. I'm pretty sure you can tell it's pretty beaten up. If you were here in the last live stream, you would have heard me say that the office manager ran it full speed into a concrete cinder block wall. This is the one. As you can tell, the damage is not very visible. According to the technician, there was a warped motor, but that was it, and that's the only thing keeping this thing from flying properly. So there's also someone from the testing group, and I won't say his name, just to sort of, you know, not make things too embarrassing for him. He apparently flew this little guy over or down a mountainside, and it landed on I believe a road 100 feet down, and apparently there's no issues. So you guys are going to really like it. Also, for everybody clamoring for acro mode on the 122D, this guy has acro mode. And at first, when we were discussing it with our testers, knowing the past, the past performance of a 122D, they were like, well, we haven't tested it yet, when I was talking to them at least. And we want to, like, so we weren't 100% sure if the acro mode that we tuned on this aircraft was going to be analogous to the acro mode that many people associate with racing quads, but apparently it is. And I actually kind of knew it would be, because as I mentioned before, the person who tuned this guy is an avid racer himself. Even before he joined the company, he was a crazy hobbyist for it. So yeah, management also gave me the okay to tell you guys that the production of the aircraft is in full swing. It will start shipping as soon as inventory reaches vendor warehouses. That's very exciting. We really hope a lot of you guys enjoy this little guy, because we have a feeling it's going to be a juggernaut. It's going to be a juggernaut. So yeah, without further ado, I'll answer some questions. Looks like we have some here. When is the 123D released? Well, I just covered that question. It's already in full production, which means as soon as the first batches get out, they'll be shipped, and it usually takes around a month to get around the globe sometimes. They come out from China and they have to go to different warehouses across the globe. Any new models being released soon? I don't know what you mean by soon, but I'm just going to say this again. They didn't give me any authorization on that front to release the information I know about the other models. Like, if there are any other models coming out, I can just say, really watch the release line going into the end of the year. All right. Is geofencing something Hubsan will be implementing at any point? I don't think so. Even if we do, the geofencing will be pretty limited to a select number of models. And I say that because the company I represent, or the company I work for, Hubsan, we like to release products that allow people the ability to customize to their heart's content, especially hardware-wise, even though we don't encourage it. And honestly, we can't, because could you imagine the amount of cases of people coming in and telling us that we told them to do a modification? That's just not nice. But I don't think so. That's not really information I'm privy to, but knowing who I work for, probably, even if it does happen, it's not going to be developed across every single GPS model. Just because the marketability of our brand is just based upon things that people can tinker around with, and people like to take and fly in a simple and also unrestrained fashion. That's, I think, the basis of a lot of our quads. Just something you can take and fly without having to think about a lot of the things that you would need to think about if you had more sophisticated aircraft, on your hands. So yeah. Does opening the drone void the warranty? Now that, no, but only if you're able to open and also put the drone back together without damaging any components. And also, I would like to note that if you make any sort of changes with non-Hubsan parts or non-stock configurations, even with Hubsan parts, then then the warranty would be void. But if you were just opening her up to do a check and know how to put everything back together and detach and reattach antennas without doing harm to the quadcopter, you're fine. They actually shipped some H123Ds out on the 20th, confirmed by Elsa. Oh, I'm not surprised. Yeah, because from what I've heard at the U.S. warehouse, the first shipments of the 123D just arrived. So I believe it's being released in waves, of course, and based on feedback, they'll also be watching user feedback a lot, just so we can make sure that the 123D racer is up to date and whatnot. I currently shop online with vendors who ship from China. Are any US vendors carrying Hubsan products and parts? If you purchase from the official Hubsan.com website, you will be getting an aircraft from our US warehouse. There are also some vendors who we drop ship for. So it would come out from the warehouse, but just be a different vendor. It wouldn't be we wouldn't be the official retailer, but the package will be from our warehouse. We do drop ship for some vendors. But if you just want to be safe, go ahead and order from our website off the US page. If you're in the US, it'll come from our US warehouse. In the new Hubsan H123D X4 can also use various flight modes such as acro. Oh yeah, it can. Yes, there are 3 modes. One is the tamest. I forgot what name it's called. I believe for now it's called manual mode, although I think the naming has been kind of shifting around at this point. It's basically the equivalent of there being somewhat a bit of being slower, being the slowest mode, and having a bit of support from from a software stabilization system. The second would be sport mode, and again, these names they've been shifting around. I'm just putting them as placeholders so that you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. What we call sport mode for now is the second slowest, or I should say, like mama bear in the middle of baby mama and papa bear. If acro were papa bear and manual mode were little bear, then sport mode is mama bear, in which it's faster than manual mode, but he still can't do any flips or any sort of tricks, anything like that. But it's faster. It is faster and has less stabilization from the firmware than manual mode or little bear does. And of course, we have acro mode. Woo, Papa Bear. And it truly is Papa Bear, because if you were to fly that thing on acro mode, I'd wait for some of the videos to come out. You'll be able to see what I mean. You flip, you do crazy turns, you go crazy fast. Just be careful when you're doing that, and if you're not as good at racing right now, because you don't want to end up like our office manager who ran this guy into the wall at full speed. Okay. Next question. Oh dear, jumped. Okay, where am I? Got lost. Is the new HT012D compatible with the H501A? That I do not know. I haven't actually used that particular transmitter or even read the functions on it, and I think I'm getting the numbers mixed up in my head. There's too much to memorize for me right now. So if it came with a non-GPS aircraft, then most likely not. In fact, I can say no. But if it came with a GPS aircraft, then I'm pretty sure yes. General rule of thumb. Keep in mind, I haven't tested it yet, so I'm not too familiar with it yet. Thank you for that info. No problem. Can altitude mode and distance flown be reduced? I don't quite know what you mean by that. Maybe you can be a little more specific? Also, manual mode manual, as we call it, little bear, does self-correction, while sport or mama bear acts more like a racer. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Can you explain how to or reference a site with more information how to use the transmitter's RSSI values to troubleshoot interference? What is the normal drop over specific distances? Okay, that's a very good question. We do have a basic tutorial or two basic tutorials on it. The first is the back to basics for troubleshooting a 2.4 flight connection, part 2. And then the other is the back to basics tutorial for troubleshooting FPV part 2. So you can find the basic instructions there. We don't commonly release the RSSI information out publicly because it can get a little confusing, but I don't think you can really troubleshoot interference. We use RSSI to troubleshoot hardware. Interference is something that you can't really control. It's really hard to try and use your RSSI to determine interference. What we do here is we get familiar with what interference looks like on the FPV screen, and also by using certain tricks when we fly. So say if we're having FPV issues like screens flashing on and off, a dead giveaway for us that we're experiencing interference instead of bad hardware is if the screen has these white static like bands doing this all the way down, like flashing down, flashing down, flashing down. So like that's a dead giveaway interference. Now, if we're talking about using RSSI for troubleshooting hardware, our general rule of thumb is this. First, we make sure that the FPV is showing on the screen. That's a dead obvious thing. But if the FPV is refusing to show on the screen and you've already rebound and tried different 5.8 FPV frequencies, what you're going to want to do is watch or like flight control, or for example, if you have your distance is too short, you think it's too short, or it's if you're flying a 501S, your aircraft's only going like 50 meters, 50, and you're like, well, what the heck? Then what you would do is you would look at the RSSI strength signal figures for the 2.4 or for the 5.8, whichever is applicable. We like to do distances. We like to do tests at 0 meters of distance and then 30 meters of distance. If your aircraft is unable to either fly to 30 meters without disconnecting like until you get nearer to it, or if you get FPV that only goes to around like 20 meters or less than 30 meters, then you can reduce the secondary distance. But the main point is to watch and see the difference between the RSSI strength figure at 0 meters and at the secondary distance that you choose. So if you're getting anything below 60, just 30 meters away, and you're experiencing those range problems, you probably got a hardware issue. I've seen instances in which interference can cause the signal strength to look artificially low. Like, for example, I've flown an aircraft once in which at 70 meters, the 5.8 signal supposedly hit 55. But my FPV was completely fine. Weird, right? That's why I say the RSSI or the signal strength figures are a very good tool, but also rely on what you're seeing from the actual FPV and the flight connection based on where you are flying. Keep in mind the environment and the things that are going around, and also juxtapose the results from flying in another area. I know that's a really long-winded answer to such a short question, but I wanted to be able to address all of that just so that people don't think that, just because my RSSI reads this, then this should happen. The RSSI is just a tool, an auxiliary tool to go along with your general observations while flying. I hope that's understandable. Anyway, long ass answer. Okay. Will the drone fly away for no reason, become unresponsive for no reason like the H501S did? My friend and every pilot on here whether you are here live or watching the recorded stream after the fact. No aircraft flies away without reason. The only difference being, do we know or do we not know the true reason of the flyaway? I have a long rant in my first ever live stream, in our first ever live stream on Hubsan, on the Hubsan official channel here on YouTube. You can go to, I'm wearing an orange jacket with a hoodie underneath. You can go to that video and listen for my very long-winded explanation there, because I don't have time today to be able to cover all of it. So yeah, next question. Can parameters for height and distance be changed to lower limits? Not in a way that is supported by us without voiding your aircraft warranty. That's my answer to that. I hope to advance and become a professional drone pilot. I recommend H501S for novices like myself. Does Hubsan have a more advanced photo, video drones planned in general with 3-axis gimbal? What do you think? If you've been here for my past couple of live streams, you would have noticed that I so far have been responding to that question with, they haven't, like, I can't really say anything, but the only thing I can say is you might want to watch our product line coming out into the later part of this year. I crashed my Storm. It lost power. I have checked all wire connections and plugged in fresh batteries. Still no juice. Nothing appears broken. Suggestions. You might want to check your aircraft's motherboard for any sort of burning. You might have fried a regulator or knocked it silly. Or also, in general, I've seen it like that. You might also want to check the power adapter. I know this is not, this isn't the Storm, but you should see there's that port. There should be a port for this little guy to connect to. Check that the pins aren't bent unduly so that one pin goes into the JSD adapter, but the other does not. That's a lower chance of happening because it's fairly well protected in there, but better safe than sorry. But for the most part, I've seen voltage regulators either burnt or knocked out by crashes. The crash has to be pretty bad, by the way, for the voltage regulator to be completely knocked out. So I think yours might be a burnt one. Does drone firmware crash after being exposed to high interference? I'm not sure about that. I don't dare give an answer to that because I'm not a software engineer and most of my knowledge comes from experience just flying these things. We don't really have anything to analyze whether or not firmware scrambles. I do know firmware scrambles though. I've been there a lot for that, and that's just the nature of code. It's not as clean cut as most people think it would be. It's a little bit like a little kid. It throws tantrums sometimes. I don't know if that's due to interference. I don't think so. Kind of hard to analyze when the drone is gone. Oh yeah, you bet it's hard to analyze when the drone is gone. In my opinion, and from my understanding after flying these things for over 2 years, it's not as much the firmware that is affected by interference as it is the operation of the hardware, especially the compass. The compass and the GPS module are both very susceptible to interference. The GPS module is actually really well built for it. There's a ceramic piece that faces downwards towards the motherboard to protect there's a metal piece that faces downwards to protect the GPS from the motherboard's interference. And the back of it, of course, faces upwards to receive the GPS signal. It's honestly a hard sell with the GPS because the GPS has to be exposed enough to be able to gather signal, but also be protected enough that it isn't, interfered with by other aircraft. So it's a hard sell. But I personally don't think code would be that affected by interference. I honestly think it's the hardware that would be that would be affected more. Damn drone's always causing trouble and problems. They're a little bad drone. I don't know about that, man. I've seen bad pilot. I've seen bad environment. And yes, I've also seen bad drone. So I've seen all three. If you're going to assume that it's only bad drone, I'm sorry, you're not. I don't think you're very well versed in the industry. What are? Oh, good afternoon. I know what that means. It's in Portuguese, but I speak enough Spanish to know what that means. Good afternoon. Thanks. No problem. It's a joke, LOL. Peace, man. Honestly, like, no shade meant. We're just swapping perspectives here. That's what I consider this. I'll put my hand up and say I'm a bad pilot. That's a good thing to be, though. At first, you have to be a bad pilot before you're a good pilot. So it's okay. The production of the Hubsan X4H109S is still set so much. I know Hubsan still plans to somehow bring a new model similar to the Hubsan. Okay, I think you're asking if we plan to bring a model similar to the H109S out. I have to say, although I'm not really authorized to give information on that point, my thoughts on it are this. If you want to look at the releases from a company from a more practical standpoint, you have to watch the direction that the UAV industry is going in. Right now, the industry is focusing on portability, ease of transportation, and smallness, not big aircraft. That being said, however, there's still pilots who love big aircraft. Like, for example, you guys, I don't know if you guys know how big the H301S is, but it is big. Like, the box alone, I think, the box alone is if I were standing up, and my head was here, like, it would be here. The box is really tall. That's a big aircraft. It's a foam aircraft, but it's a big aircraft. There still will be pilots who love to fly big. But in general, when the industry trends a certain way, those are commonly they're in the minority most of the time. General rule of thumb. Or else the industry wouldn't be swinging in the exact opposite direction now, would it? Industry is made of people. The UAV industry is made of pilots, both amateur, like all the way from the newbie all the way to the most advanced pilot. It's made of clients. So whichever way the industry swings, like, it will tell you what the majority of the community is looking at. And right now, smaller the better. Well, not necessarily the smaller the better, but a lot of people really like smaller ones. Yes, good question from John Bindles, that one. Have you ever experienced return to home failing to function when drone loses the connection? Yes, for various reasons. There can be interference going on with the GPS reading. There's also been cases in which I've seen the GPS module, like during when we're testing an aircraft, a GPS module is not good, so we have to replace it, and we've had that happen. And also just the occasional hiccup by the firmware. I'll be really frank. There's one or two, it's like, especially after I upgrade firmware, Like, I'll be flying the darn thing for 300, 400 meters. I flip return to home. It stays there for like 3 minutes. And I'm like, okay. I shut off the return to home. I turn it back on. And it comes right back. That's the nature of the ball game, honestly. It can be interference. It can be bad part. It can be hiccup. And it can just, and then all, like, it can also be operator due to, or there's another possibility. If you're using return to home and your battery is low, then it could also be the aircraft getting stuck in between whether or not it should land, or if it should heed your command to return to home, it gets stuck there. Okay, ooh, I don't have much time left, so I'm gonna wrap up with the last couple of questions. Coming US regulations might have a huge impact on the drone industry. It's beginning to look like requirements for remote ID is more and more likely. Oh, yes, I would love to. I would like to, yeah, totally address that particular. There have been, as you know, regulations from companies to make airspace more commercial, restricted to commercial flight, which is not good news for the hobby sector. Personally speaking, I don't like it at all either. Honestly speaking, on the question about the geofencing, I don't think, I forgot to mention, like, unless Congress or lawmakers decide to clamp down and just make it law that geofencing is mandatory. I don't think it'll happen across the entire range. I highly doubt that'll happen, but you never know what will happen with law. So, yeah. All right. Hi, Annie. When the H501S doesn't return all the way home after a temporary loss of signal, I'm pretty sure that results in confusion and lost drones. Yes, I do agree, because most people don't understand that once the aircraft regains connection, it stops there. Because the return to home is terminated. You're talking about things that happen in between the return to home or in between the loss of signal and the return to home coming in. Honestly, again, there are different possibilities that happen there. I've seen bad drone. I've seen bad environment. I've seen bad pilot. So it really would depend on what other contingencies there would be. How about return to home failsafe on loss of signal not working? So with that particular, I'd say my answer is the same as when return to home doesn't work, or if the drone doesn't come back when you use return to home. Yeah, my answer to that is in general the same, except for I do know what our engineers do when that happens and we have to get the aircraft back, is often they first take a picture of the screen just to make sure that they have some sort of coordinates to go off of, and then I don't know if I would recommend to the general populace, because it's a move that they do because they're so comfortable around Hubsan aircraft. They shut off the transmitter and wait for the aircraft to return to home, because that's one of the honestly, that's one of the protocols that they trust the most. The aircraft basically relies on the takeoff point in GPS mode with 6 or more satellites that they can, use to land on, that the aircraft can use to land with or return to home with. But we are dependent on loss of signal return to home functioning. Sorry, that's nothing to be sorry about. I know, we are too. I'm just telling you what the possibilities and the things that I've seen from it not happening. And I've turned off the transmitter, no go return to home. Yeah, that happens. It happens very occasionally. Like when we're troubleshooting aircraft for one reason or another, it'll happen. I've seen bad environment. I've seen bad drone. Both. I've seen. There are several times in which we didn't even know what the heck happened, but it would just stop there. And actually, for us, it would more be like interference, because we fly in such an industrial area. It's ridiculous. And factories all around. So again, if you could recover that aircraft, we and take her apart, we'd be able to like give you more information on that. But again, as you said, it's really hard to determine what the heck happened when the aircraft is actually missing. Actually, it's impossible to determine what happened when the aircraft is missing. Okay, I'll answer one last question and I gotta go. The life of a tech lead. Okay. Let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by the toe. Okay. Is return to home a single transmission or continual? I'm not sure. That's one of the other things that I don't know. There's a lot of specifics in terms of technicalities that even short of, because I don't have the information on that in terms of from R&D to go off of. So I would think it's single transmission. I think. I'm not sure. But that would be a good question to send to service@hubsan.com. That would be a good question to send to service@hubsan.com. All right. So I believe that is all today. Again, thank you to everyone for watching, and a greeting to everyone who has been able to make it here today. We are, as always, very thankful and appreciative to you for asking these questions. Hopefully, the recording of this live stream will also help many people who were not able to make it for this day. As a reminder, if you could not make it for the live stream of this video and are watching it after the fact, we will have another two live streams next week. One on Monday and the other on Wednesday. I will post up a follow-up reminder along with the live stream recording link of this particular session of the specific time in both Pacific time and UTC time. Whew, that was a lot. So yeah, have a nice week. Have a nice weekend. Much love from Hubsan. Order this little guy. Now seriously, have a nice weekend.